we are comprised of everything because of the fact that we come from divinity, that we are divinity having a human experience. Because you're not content and comfortable with this relationship you have with the internal partner, you are constantly making concessions for external partners because you're just trying to nail one down. I think that society as well as theocracy have really banded together to create misconceptions around collaboration between the sexes. We literally have been subconsciously programmed not to trust each other. Grandma still thinks that men suck because grandma still feels like she should have been able to burn her bra or whatever, and she's passed that on. And so we're being bred by people who have these second-hand beliefs that we don't even know where they came from. When it comes to people who are born in the wrong body and things like that, do I think it happens? 100%. Do I think that it needs an overhaul of society? I don't. I think that women are engineered to receive and men are engineered to give. I think that the masculine energy's responsibility is to lead, and the feminine energy is to find a good leader. This word submission, it's not about overtaking someone's will or eradicating sovereignty. It's about, hey, you know what you're doing. I'm making an executive decision that you're the person that I trust to follow, and that's what I'm gonna do. That's what I see the role of a woman being. You're dating and he lives with 4 other guys and their house is disgusting and they live in a bachelor pad, but you put on this cute little apron and you're like, I'm gonna clean for you guys. Like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And you go in there and you do it and he's like, thanks babe, that was amazing. The house looks spotless. Fast forward 10 years and it's like, get your shit off the ground. I am not your maid. Well, what changed? Nothing changed. You expected a different energy from a man. Period. End of story. In the greater scheme of things, if he's out chopping wood, if he's out making money, if he's out fighting with the landlord because of something stupid you did, or he's downtown fixing something for you, does he also need to clean up after himself? Or if you're there and you're next to the mess, could you clean it up?
Anything that you hear in this podcast is not intended to be taken as medical advice. Thoughts and opinions you hear shared are just that, thoughts and opinions. And any action that you take based on what you hear is done at your own risk. And with that said, enjoy the show. Welcome everybody to today's episode of The Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. I'm your host, Zach the Health King. Today I have a very special guest with me, someone that I've already had some very interesting and lengthy conversations with, and I'm very enthused to be able to bring those conversations to you. She's a divine mystic, and she's here to help awaken women to the truth of the divine union. She's a master neuroenergetics practitioner and a clinical hypnotherapist. That is an AmyLee Westervelt. AmyLee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I am super happy to have you. I think the work that you're doing is very important. And so let's dive right on into it. How would you describe the work that you do in this world?
So I think that my biggest role is in helping specifically women because I am a woman. I certainly could help men, but I just really feel comfortable. I know how this equipment works, so I figure I'll just go with it. Helping women to recognize their own wholeness. And what I mean by that is their human side as well as their divinity. So that anthropos, that awareness of both pieces of them, the part that is 3D and, is confined to the material, to the physical world, and then as well as the part of them that is walking around in the ethereal spiritual world.
And so what is the tie between those two? Are those two separate things? Do you have to address one with the other, or can you kind of compartmentalize them?
So I think that most of us think that they are compartmentalized. Most of us have this illusion that we're people and that, there's like fate and things happen and victimhood happens. And we fail to realize that there's another aspect of us that is, the universe, source, God, higher power, what have you, and that aspect doesn't exist up there somewhere or in the sky or in heaven, but it's actually a living, breathing component of who we are. And for women, this happens to be, in polarity, this happens to be the masculine energy. So if you think about the concept of the self, the idea is that the self is genderless. It's just an energy. It's an everything energy. It's the collective consciousness boiled down into a holographic piece. And so this self does not have a gender. It's genderless. It has the duality of both. And so we are very aware as women and as men of our own gender or our own, way. Like, I am a woman, you are a man. But we sometimes fail to realize that there's actually a whole other aspect of ourselves. If there is an in, there's an out. If there's an up, there's a down. As within, so without, right? So everything that we are, we also are not. And everything we aren't, we also are. Like, if you think about it, if we are good, then we are evil. If we are happy, then we are sad. We are comprised of everything because of the fact that we come from divinity, that we are divinity having a human experience. So for women, that means that we have a whole other aspect of ourselves, a repressed aspect, which is the sacred masculine. And it is my understanding and my methodology to teach women how to connect to this sacred masculine energy, to lock in the other side of that energy, that source, that universal, duality, so that we're using all of the energy, all of the power, all of the ability that we have to co-create in this world, rather than just kind of like half of it. And so that's really what divine union, which is what I work with, is all about.
Interesting. And so you mentioned in that kind of your mission with a woman that you're working with is to connect to her inner sacred masculine side. But does that have to come before or after she even connects with her actual feminine side? Because I would argue that most women are even disconnected from that part of themselves. So which one has to be kind of looked at first?
That's such a good question. So when I talk about the feminine side, what I'm really talking about is the identity of the feminine. Okay, so never mind the qualities or the lean backness or the surrender or the trust or any of those things. I'm just talking about the anatomy from the very beginning. Like, we're talking about, you identify as a woman, you see yourself as a woman. You may or may not be attracted to men. You could be attracted to women. That's certainly not, doesn't preclude you from doing this work. But we're talking about identifying as the feminine energy. So it's not necessarily about being disconnected from those qualities, although you're right, a lot of women do tend to operate in masculine energy. But I'm talking about an actual masculine entity. I'm talking about the energy of a masculine character or personality, if you will, that is kind of, if you think about it, almost has office space inside of a woman. Okay, so there's like a space where he resides. And so as small children, and in Abrahamic society, we're taught that this is the sky daddy, right? That's God, and he's up in the sky, and you pray to him, and he gives you what you want, and you be good, and he'll give you good, and you're bad, and he'll punish you, right? So we have this idea of this external deity that smiles down on us or punishes us or whatever. Well, what I'm talking about is recognizing that aspect doesn't live up there, it lives in here, and also acknowledging and owning our sovereignty of that being. Meaning, for example, let's say you have two really amazing cars. You've got a Ferrari and you've got a Jaguar, right? And you own them both. But it doesn't matter how rich you are or how famous you are or whatever, you can only drive one at a time. You own them both, but you can only animate one at a time. You can't drive them both down the road at the same time. So what I'm talking about is that we are these dualistic energies. And when we are operating as human, we are the feminine. But we can, if we choose to, operate in the masculine as far as that entity's energy, which is different than a woman peeing standing up, or a woman, I don't know, doing something that is, usually prescribed for men. I'm not talking about operating in masculine energy. I'm talking about animating the masculine entity.
I see. So what's necessary for comprehension of this conversation is to understand the fundamental framework that you have either formed or studied, or the way that you are presenting it, in that we have divine essence within us. We have spirit essence within us, if you want to call it ethereal essence, whatever language, verbiage someone would want to apply. We have some sort of metaphysical aspect within us that's driving our consciousness, that's driving our flesh body. And that entity, that divineness in us, is in a way gender neutral, in the sense that, but it's also all encompassing because it has all energies within it, both the masculine and the feminine. And so bear with me in my comprehension of this.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
So by default, we in society have been led as men and as women to only ever recognize or think about that we have a masculine as a man or feminine as a woman energy within us as a driving force and a driving factor. Now, of course, that's, traditionally, historically. Nowadays, 2024, everything's a goddamn mess. But
Right.
People haven't necessarily looked at that complementary part within themselves, and that is leaving out such a large part of the puzzle for their own operation and comprehension of themselves. But not only as a total individual, but if I'm a man and I'm not recognizing my inner feminine energy, then my inner masculine energy is being done a disservice as well, because it doesn't have its counterpart.
Your external masculine energy, yes, right. So if you think of it kind of like, if it has both, then instead of thinking of it like a triangle that's cut down the middle, think of it like a diamond. So the top part is the outward energy, and the bottom part is like the inside of an iceberg. Okay. So it's like you are masculine on the outside, and then that internal bolstering partnership energy of your inner other, as Jung would say it, right, is the feminine. So you are out there making it happen, manifesting, creating, doing, getting, bringing things. And that inner energy is like, yes, and I also want this. And can you make this too? You're amazing. You're so incredible. Look at how manly you are. Look at how much you create. This is amazing. I want to be with you, right? Like, I enjoy the way that you create. And so you're being bolstered internally by this feminine energy that's letting you know that you're doing it right. That's giving you ideas for creation, that's saying, oh my gosh, we should paint it this color. You know what I mean? And so I think that in biblical terms, they call this the glory. In Hebrew, it's the Shekinah, right? It's like the energy between the letters. It's that feminine energy of like, what should we paint it? And like the ideas. And so a masculine energy will have all of this internally. But if he's disconnected from it, chances are he's going to be disconnected from it externally too. He's not going to be able to manifest a partner that's going to bolster him, that's going to support him, that's going to be his muse, because he's disconnected from that energy internally.
I see. And that's a very interesting point as well. And one that I can say I would probably agree with. And it goes in hand with what we've kind of talked about in our previous conversations, in that if you don't have a healthy comprehension of the counterpart energy, which only can come from, I guess, in a most full way of comprehending your inner self, because that's where all proper comprehension comes from in the first place, no matter what the topic is, then yeah, perhaps you don't have a good framework of comprehension to even attract, we could say, or even recognize a quality that you'd want in a partner and how to even interact with them, even if you do have them.
Right. And additionally, just to give it, another caveat, you, because you're not content and comfortable with this relationship you have with the internal partner, you are constantly making concessions for external partners because you're just trying to nail one down because you feel like you don't have one already and you're not content. So you're making concessions for people that have deal breakers, people that really aren't what you want, but you're like, I mean, she looks good and she's good in bed. It doesn't matter that she's a psycho and calls me 17 times a day. It doesn't matter that she slashed my tires because, there's some good things. Whereas if you have a connection with your internal feminine and she's like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. You're everything I ever wanted. Like, let's create together. And you have this awareness, you're so much more discerning about anything else you add to that equation because it's already perfect. We're not looking for something to complete us anymore because we're complete. It's like, if I never meet another man in the rest of my life, I am all good because my inner masculine has got me. And when I'm like that, now all of a sudden I am an energetic match for more of that contentment, for more of that wholeness, for more of that feeling of enoughness. And now I'm magnetizing things left and right. Now I'm magnetizing clients. Now I'm magnetizing potential partners. Now I get to be the one who's discerning. It's very different than, say you're dating and it's like you're talking to one person and it's like, oh, she didn't call me. Oh my gosh, she didn't call me. Versus when you go speed dating and you've got 25 women, if somebody doesn't call you, you don't care because you've got 10 other girls lined up and ready. If somebody smokes and you don't like smokers, she's gone. You don't have to go, oh, well, she's the only one who likes me. I guess I'll just tell her to eat a breath mint. Do you see what I mean? So when you're making these concessions externally, you probably aren't connected to the awareness that you've already got it all. You've already got it all. And when you know that, then anything that comes from external has to be perfection in order to align with the perfection you've created internally.
Yeah, that's a huge point because you clearly see all over people settling and dealing with a bunch of nonsense from their counterparts that they know is bad for them and they know is annoying them and doing whatever that just doesn't align with them. But the alternative is, I guess, to have a void in themselves because they don't have a healthy feeling of connection with that counterpart energy in themselves in any regard. So it's like they have that void that has to be filled by something, anything. And then obviously there's a lot of things that we could extrapolate from there, talking about how, people in their presentation might not be the most desirable mate for the opposite sex. So then they have less mate selection. So there's always a lot going on, of course, but we are talking about one piece of the equation that is internal feelings and internal wellness, which is inherently tied to all the external stuff as well.
Absolutely. And when you establish that connection, I'm glad you brought the health piece up. Now, all of a sudden, you're in a partnership and there's a responsibility for you to stay alive, to look good, to, be high energy. I mean, when I started connecting with my sacred masculine, he was like, you're going to keep yourself looking nice. You're going to start going to the gym. You're going to start taking care of, like, that was part of the agreement for the relationship. Like, if you are the person or you're the partner who's representing my partner, these are the expectations I have. And now instead of me being like, oh, I don't really feel like doing self-care, now it's like, this is my responsibility as a partner. And so I care for myself and I carry myself in a whole different way because I'm not just representing myself. I'm representing my inner king. And my inner king has standards that he wants his queen to perform at.
Is this work that you started doing in a time where you were in a healthy relationship, an unhealthy relationship, or lacked a relationship altogether?
So it's kind of a loaded question, but the answer is that my husband, who is my best friend, who I adore to the moon and back, decided to undertake a ordeal and do a water fast. If you've never done a water fast, he literally for 41 days didn't do anything but drink water. He didn't eat anything. He was tiny. It was like The Machinist with Christian Bale. 0 out of 10 recommend. And we had a very close relationship. We talked all the time. We were always together. We connect very deeply. While he was going through this ordeal, he kind of receded into himself. It was almost like he was a monk at the top of a mountain, but he didn't have the luxury of doing that because we have 5 kids. So he receded very deeply into himself, and I found myself very disconnected from him. And I lived my life very connected to him. I believed that he was the other side of my soul, that he was my partner, that without him, there was only half of me. And I kind of started to go a little bit crazy. And I say that because I was just desperate for this energy. I needed hits of his energy in order to feel whole. And it was at that point, that I was like, well, I'm not going to cheat on him. We've been married for years. I adore him to the moon and back. This is going to end. And so what do I do to deal with this? And the thing I came up with was when I went to sleep at night, I would pretend that I had this boyfriend. Maybe I was, my eternal teenage self that I would talk to, that would listen to me, that I could download my day to, which I wasn't able to do that with my husband anymore. And the more that I talked to this energy, the more that it talked back. And it wasn't until probably a couple weeks in, I noticed that I was starting to look forward to talking to this energy. I was starting to get excited, and it was starting to talk back, and it was giving me advice, and it was giving me ideas. And that's when, when my husband came back from his ordeal, I wasn't resentful. I wasn't mad. You left me. It was like, hey, how was it? So what was, because I found a way to find wholeness in myself. And then I did some research, a lot of research, because I'm a researcher. And it turns out that this is actually a very common thing that people connect to their inner other. And, Carl Jung talks about it. It goes all the way back to the temples of Inanna and Isis, and this idea of hieros gamos, which the Catholic Church has, taken on and bastardized, but it's a Greek word that means holy matrimony. It's uniting the external self with the internal self and recognizing the wholeness combined. So I was inadvertently connecting to this energy that I didn't even know existed until I accidentally fell upon it. And then I decided, okay, well, let's see if this works for my clients. So went to some of my clients, had them practice the same thing. And sure enough, magnetizing more money, husbands were all over them without ever having to speak to anybody or do anything differently. We were we're really onto something here. So then I created this, entire process that I walked people through of connecting to this energy and how to build this relationship and to create this integration once and for all. And so that's kind of where it started. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that this is something that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, is this awareness that this God self is there waiting for us to connect to it, not in a father-daughter relationship, but, in a husband-wife relationship. In a partnership, and there's almost an intimate romance to it. And being the Scorpio that I am, of course, that was right up my alley, right? I was like, oh, love and intensity and all the things. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I found it.
I don't even remember what my question was, but it was a very good answer. So I liked it. Well, you said clients. So you said you made this realization, and then, I asked you what state of a relationship you were in when,
oh yeah, great, but also not.
no, it's fine. You said you already had clients that you were working with prior to kind of getting into this field of study. So what was the capacity or nature of your work with clients before? You're a counselor, a therapist, or a coach?
I'm a life coach. Yeah. So I was working with the feminine side. I was helping them to connect, like you said, to the feminine energy and to claim the feminine essence. And I think we talked about this offline, but there's this spectrum, right? There's the women who think they should be all women, and there's the women who think they should be everything that men are. And I was way over there with the all women side. So it was you need to be, what was the word? Submissive to your husband. And, because that's where I came from. It was okay, this makes sense. I'm going to be all in my feminine. He's going to be all in his masculine. Great. What happens when he does a water fast and you're all by yourself? I didn't really think of that, right? I was just in this energy of where's the rest of me? Now I have completely depended on an external person to complete me. What am I going to do? Heaven forbid something happens. I start over and I go get a new one. Like, that didn't make sense anymore. And so what this did was it kind of like had me bring that piece in, because these women, they were getting into their feminine and they were, wonderful things were happening. They were feeling so good, but the manifestation just felt so stiff and it felt so forced. And they just didn't necessarily feel like they were having the monetary results, but they were having the feeling good in their bodies, and they were feeling more like they could use their voices. And it wasn't until I recognized that, gosh, there's this whole energy that's just missing. And then once we plugged that in, there was, so much resentment in their relationships disappeared, so much animosity between them and their partners. So many of my clients were like, well, I don't want to talk to my husband about this because he'll think I'm a nag. He feels like I talk about this too much, or, he doesn't think I'm pretty anymore, or like whatever. And we would do these work and they're like, he asked me if he could take the kids for the afternoon. He told me I was gorgeous today. He can't keep his hands off me. And I'm just like, what is causing this? And it was because they were no longer giving off, I need you, I need this client, I need your time. How come you don't think I'm pretty? How come this? How come that? And they were no longer pulling from their field. They were complete and they were emanating completeness, which was then attracting more completeness. And that was the magic piece that had been missing from my work for so many years. And then once we found it and we figured out how to integrate it, we've been on a wait list ever since.
Yeah, that's beautifully. That little snippet right there was so well put that I barely even have a response to it, because you just said it already so well.
Thanks.
When we have a sense of completion, you're right. Then we don't have to approach our relationship partner with neediness, because nobody likes neediness in a healthy way, right? You could say, okay, a manipulator, a narcissist, a this, that, the other might want someone to feel overly dependent upon them, and they might get off on that. But we're talking about in healthy relationship structures. And need is such an interesting word, right? There's a difference between needing someone or being needy, right? It's like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's like, look, hey, the car is broken. I need you to do this, but it's whatever.
Right.
Or, yeah, there's a difference between like coming from a needy energy, that energy of lack, because it's kind of like a pathetic energy. And that's just repulsive, especially in a sense to a masculine man,
Right.
whether it's coming from a woman or otherwise. That like uber neediness from like a desperation thing, it's off-putting I think probably even more so to the other side. When a man comes to a woman in like a needy frame, oh my God, I can't imagine anything more revolting for a woman to experience than like a pathetic needy man. And so achieving that sense of completion and wholeness and fullness, I really think is absolutely essential within both partners. That's a key element as well. You could have all the healthy mindset and mind frame you want. If your partner is not right in the head, well, then that's not going to go well. It's super essential for both partners in a relationship in order for that relationship to be healthy. And so we're talking about solutions, right? Let's talk a bit about the problem, because there certainly is one in this modern world. I think, like I mentioned before, men are disconnected from their masculinity, but then also from their inner femininity. Women are disconnected from their femininity, but then also their inner masculinity. There's resentment in all these directions. There's miscomprehension about how these energies work. There's this proportion that none of it even exists, and it's all just some gender neutral mush. How would you describe the average state of femininity and masculinity in today's world?
Wow, that is quite the generalization.
Yeah, I'll let you
I
have some
think
creative freedom there.
I think that society, as well as, theocracy, have really banded together to create misconceptions around, okay, this is a lot of big words at once, to create misconceptions around collaboration between the sexes. If you go as far back as the Adam and Eve story, right? Like we literally have been subconsciously programmed not to trust each other, that they're out to get you, that they just want one thing from you. I mean, we could come up with so many one-liners about either sex, about why they are, out to get you. And society breeds this very easily. I mean, it's so interspersed into everything we do. Sexuality, parenting, money, like the glass ceiling, like we're constantly being reminded that somebody is out to get us. And because of that, our identification with the opposite sex has this warning on it, this caution tape around it. So when we see those qualities trying to come through internally in partnership, we reject them. We don't want to identify with those. We want those to be other. And so the more that we can recognize the beauty in those things, like for example, if you look at women in the 1950s, you can look at some of the advertisements or news articles that talk about the way women should behave, and you should take your makeup off after your husband goes to bed, and so that he can sleep soundly or whatever. Like, don't worry your husband. He's doing his thing. You're just there to serve him. There's very much a lot of animosity around that with women that never experienced that, but they have inherited that from people who have. So it's like something that happened to somebody else, but it has been passed down to me to be angry about it, when nobody in this country, in this moment that I know of, and I'm sure someone will say, yeah, there are these cults or whatever, but for the most part, that behavior is not sanctioned or endorsed by anyone anymore. But we are holding on to this resentment and this anger for this disparity that happened 70, 80 years ago. Because grandma still thinks that men suck, because grandma still feels like she should have been able to burn her bra or whatever. And she's passed that on. And so we're being bred by people who have these secondhand beliefs that we don't even know where they came from. So that's a big part of it. And these women have this resentment and this anger, and men only want one thing. Well, keep in mind, a lot of these men only want one thing were raised by women who knew that that was the way that men treated women, and resolved to change the way they parented and brought up different sons. And there are a whole slew of men out there that don't only want one thing. I know, because I married one. He was born in 1976, right? So we have these misconceptions, and we compartmentalize entire groups. And that creates a chasm between us. So now we're not trusting the external. Guess what? That's because we're not trusting the internal. Like, I can't depend on the universe or the sacred masculine to protect me, to have my back. I'm just going to keep doing. And I'm going to hyperachieve, not because I want more, but because I'm afraid of having less. And that's where that misconception happens.
Yeah, you absolutely touched on the natural thing that happens for a woman in a feeling of disconnection from a healthy masculine figure in any regard, in that they become hypermasculinized, because femininity in itself is it's needs
vulnerable.
To be protected. It's vulnerable. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. It needs to be protected by something. It's like a turtle, and the masculinity is the shell. It needs to be there to allow the femininity to live. And so when it's not achieved in a healthy way, then that woman kind of masculinizes, and that kind of calluses and shells up. So yeah, that language you used right at the end there definitely highlights that process. And so I want to ask, you described how the past used to sanction a woman's behavior and kind of the guidelines that were purported for women in a particular way within society. How would you describe what is sanctioned now? What is the current sanctioned behavior for a woman in society, I suppose, as an individual and in a relationship? What is the official recommendations that are going out? Not your beliefs, but what is the overall kind of thing that's being pushed that you observe?
Well, I would say that it's kind of like all bets are off at this point. I don't think that any particular sex, gender, binary, non-binary, whatever you want to call it, whatever piece of the flag, I don't think that anybody is feels safe enough to acknowledge that anybody should do anything, because that's the kind of thing that gets you canceled. Case in point, men who are having babies. Now we're supposed to call them birthing people, right? So there's this idea that all bets are off. I mean, what a woman should or shouldn't do. I mean, women, my husband is an Army Ranger. I think you know this. And for a very, very long time, they did not let females into Ranger school. And my husband explained, like, yeah, like if you're downwind or, down, whatever, not downwind, down, I don't know what it's called, downrange. That's it. Downwind means behind a fart. Downrange. If you're downrange, you want someone there who's strong enough, who can do the work, who can whatever. And so females for a very long time were not allowed in combat. And to him, that made perfect sense. Like, the bodies are different. So what's the answer to that? Well, then let's hyper-masculinize women and let's turn them into bodybuilders and let's G.I. Jane them and let's make them men. Okay, but then that's a man, right? So it's like, yes, women can do anything men can do, 100%. But like, when you override everything about yourself to match a man, couldn't it be argued that that's simply usurping manhood? I mean, that's what I think. Now, it doesn't really matter what I think, but I say this because you can't have it both ways. You can't be the thing and do the things, next to the opposite sex in your own way, and then also want to not be that thing and be as much like this other thing so that you can compete. It's like, that's why we have different leagues for different people, because there's an understanding that different people with different abilities operate in different ways, right? For example, if a woman was playing tackle football and she falls on her breasts, that's probably going to hurt, getting your breasts flattened on a football field. A man isn't going to have that same issue. You know what I mean? Like, so I would argue that today, nobody's allowed to claim anything or identify with anything without someone from the other side, on either side, being able to say, no, I want that too. I'm claiming that as well. So I would say we've moved from like, women should do this and men are responsible for this, to do whatever you want with whatever parts you want, however you want, because God forbid I tell you no, and all of a sudden you come after my livelihood. That's where we are. Do you agree, disagree?
I think there's a bit of, political correctness in the answer, of course, but I think everyone with ears to hear will hear what you said. And, it's anyone with eyes to see can see what's going on. Yeah, there's the absolute clusterfuck meshing of both genders into this, like I said, gender neutral mush. And we could go into all the conspiracy realities behind that and why that is, whether it's population control, just sowing chaos and then just nonsense, whatever. But more importantly, I think it's also time. I think we are seeing a backlash from the living, breathing public kind of comprehending, hey, no, we've let you guys say this nonsense for so long. Yeah. It was cute at first. Now it's causing all these problems. because it was only ever going to result in problems. When you go against the natural order of things, problems arise. The more you do so, the more problems arise. There is no way to do nonsense right. And that's what it all is.
Yeah.
When we get away from men being men and women being women, it is nonsense. And there's no way for it to be healthy. There's no way for it to be right. I don't care what language, what statistics that are made up, anyone wants to throw anywhere. It's garbage. Everyone knows it's garbage, and I'm not afraid to say it. YouTube already
And
hates
I will say, I want to go on the record saying, I do think some people are born into the wrong body. I absolutely think that from a gender perspective, it is very possible that the outside of a person could look one way and the person's internal side feels differently. But I don't think it's anywhere on the scale that it's being shoved down our throats. I think this is an outlier that happens in like 1 in 2 million births or something like that, that could happen biologically, that those two things could cross. I don't think it happens anywhere near where we need to pass laws about it or any of the, I don't think that. But I do think it happens. And I do think that those people deserve to have sovereignty, but I don't think it's a big enough problem. I mean, like, for example, hemophiliacs, if they get cut, they can bleed to death because their blood doesn't clot. Have we changed all of society to accommodate hemophiliacs? Do restaurants not have knives to cut steak just in case a hemophiliac comes? No. Why? Because it's not a big enough problem. It's not something that should change the flow of society. And so in that regard, when it comes to people who are born in the wrong body and things like that, do I think it happens? 100%. Do I think that it needs an overhaul of society? I don't.
Oh, absolutely not. And yeah, when you start making entire social engineered movements in media and movies and every TV show and every other celebrity being a different gender and every other this, that, the other, it's clear that it's more than an actual medical thing. Nobody at the top actually believes it's a medical thing that's occurring. It is just social engineering and population control. It is really just the honest truth of it. And you don't have to put your name to that or not, but I will say that. And so
and voter harvesting.
Yeah. All the above nonsense. Everyone knows it. It's really not that complicated. Just not enough people are saying it. But so that's the nonsense that's going on out there. What do you think, or how would you describe is the role or function of a woman? And I guess that's a two-part question, in society, I guess, in general, or also within a relationship. How would you describe the purpose of a function?
I've never actually been asked that before. And I think it's going to be different for different people, right? Because I think that in some relationships, roles are reversed. So, for example, in my family, I'm the breadwinner. I have the business, and my husband, who's a former Army Ranger, stays home with the kids. That's his responsibility. But in terms of his role in the family, he is definitely the, the priesthood head. He's the head of household. He's the one who has the final say. So we have that relationship. I have friends who they're the stay-at-home mom and their partner is the breadwinner. So I don't necessarily think there are specific roles for women, other than I would say, if I was going to paint it with a broad brush, I think that women are engineered to receive and men are engineered to give. And so I think that women are meant to be open to receiving, to being soft, to creativity and those kind of things. And they are meant to be, I mean, if you think about it biologically, right? Like a woman, cave woman or whatever, like she would receive the seed of her partner and she would make herself as attractive as possible in order to acknowledge, be acknowledged by that wonderful seed. But not only that, she would put him through trials and ordeals and things like that to prove that he was the best seed. So she wouldn't just fall at his feet. He had to basically conquer her. And he did that through showing her that he was a quality leader. One of the ways he did that was to knock out the competition. Another way was to show her that he knew where these berries grew that they could eat, that no one else knew where they were, and so on and so forth. So the man, I think that the masculine energy's responsibility is to lead, and the feminine energy is to find a good leader, not just to be led, but to find someone who's worthy of leading. And then through submission, which again doesn't mean, okay, well, you just do whatever you're doing. It means I acknowledge that you have the plan that I'm choosing to follow, and now I'm going to follow it. Okay. So it's like if we're in the woods and we're all lost, and my husband goes, I'm an Army Ranger, I did land nav for years, follow me. We all just submitted to him. Does that mean that we don't have our own sovereignty? No, we said, okay, you clearly know where you're going. It's getting dark. We're going to follow you. When you go to the bakery and you want to order a cake and you're literally like, hey, write happy birthday, Kate, on it and put some flowers, you're submitting an order to them. You are saying, hey, this is what I want, and now I'm putting it in your hands. But we act like this word submission means like I'm down on my knees with my eyes down and I'm like, yes, sir. Like, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's aspects that, in the kink community, and that's great. But in the day-to-day life, though, that is a woman's role. If she chooses to, that's where the machinery is going to work the best. Even, outside of that, there's a really famous doctor, Chris Lyon, and she wrote a book. She's the dominant one in her relationship. And I believe it's her wife is the submissive. And she calls it leading and supporting relationships. So there's the leader and there's the person who's being supported, right? And so it's not about overtaking someone's will or eradicating sovereignty. It's about, hey, you know what you're doing. I'm making an executive decision that you're the person that I trust to follow, and that's what I'm going to do. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what I see the role of a woman being.
AmyLee, you're making this very difficult for me because you're pretty much saying everything that I would have to say anyway and just taking it away. I might just log off and let you finish the session.
You're used to arguing, are you?
What's that?
Are you used to arguing, are you?
No, not arguing. It's just that you are very compendiously and accurately conveying what I very much agree with and using wonderful examples and wonderful language that's clear to understand. So yeah, thank you already for this participation.
Well, I take it from an empowering perspective. It's not like a lot of women act like men are trying to subvert us. And yes, for years they did 100%. Go back to the 1950s and look at those pamphlets. It was the way things were done. I would also argue that women were very much part of that as well. And women were at the forefront. And if you go look before women's suffrage, before women were allowed to vote, there were a lot of women who were right there saying that this wasn't a good idea, that women shouldn't have these opportunities. And they were vocal about it. You can go and study this. There were so many women. And truthfully, I believe that a lot of the disease of the patriarchy actually comes from the oligarchy. It actually comes from the church. It actually comes from the place where the church would say, hey, you need to get your women in line. Because what are women? Women are creative thinkers. And women were starting to connect esoterically and intuitively to the power that we all have. And they were bringing it home to their husbands and saying, hey, you don't have to listen to this dogmatic bullshit. If you want to, you're connected directly to source. I know this because I'm intuitive and I'm getting these awarenesses. And the church was like, you need to calm your lady friend down. You need to tell her to stop running her mouth because she doesn't know what she's talking about. And so that's where we started to see the subjugation of women. It wasn't by their husbands. It was by the clergy. It was by the church communities that told them they needed to reel these women in because they were onto something. And it was then through that oligarchy and through the theology that we started to see this patriarchy come true. But if you look at it, the men that were perpetrating the patriarchy were worms. I mean, they weren't strong men. They were men that went every Sunday to be told what to do and what to think so they didn't go to hell. There are men that literally died, and women too, that went to their deathbeds thinking they were going to hell for eating meat on Friday. And 30 years later, the Pope said, oh, never mind, that's not a sin anymore. So what, did they all swim into heaven?
Well, yeah, we can get into the Pope and everything he says. Apparently, you can go chop your genitals up and still be, kudo, get a thumbs
But
up.
I mean the Pope back then, the Pope
Yeah.
when I was little, the Pope in the 80s. But my point, though, is that men have been subjugated as much as women have. It's just that men were subjugated into subjugating women.
Yes. Yes, this is such an important conversation because people get so lost in the men versus women. I'm the victim. No, I'm the victim. No, we collectively are the victims. And
Doesn't it just feel so good to say that? Don't you just feel all the power rushing back into you when you say it? It's us. We were the victim. We were the ones.
Exactly. And it's an interesting frame, or not frame, but it's an interesting way you described it. And it seems rather accurate in that it was an attack on men, even to attack from the top down. It was an attack on the men to first attack via attacking the women, because women are the spiritual advisors to men. So it was, you know what I'm saying? Because it's ultimately the men who are going to stand up for society and who do shape the world. Mm-hmm. So to attack them, you attack their advisors, you attack their guidance, you attack their women, and then inherently that part of them crumbles, and then it's all a clusterfuck. And then when you get the men, to do it to their own women, well, now, all right, your job's a lot easier if you are the overseers that kind of want that.
Right. So yeah, because now you can subjugate them freely, because now that intuition and that guidance, and also, I mean, let's talk about Napoleon Hill and transmutation, right? If men and women are not connecting during relations, because men are told that you don't want to let a woman get too, you don't want to get too into it because you don't want her to suck you in or whatever, brothels, you can't enjoy sex. Well, now we're also removing that magical ability through transmutation for manifestation, because that's where the power comes from. So I didn't know this until recently. This is going to blow your mind. But when you think about brothels and you think about like the ancient temples where men would go to have sex with like goddesses or whatever, or, the temples of Isis, you think that these men wanted to get their rocks off, and they went to these places because they're men, and they went to get, their jollies or whatever. And these women were taught the art of pleasing men. This is not true. It actually was that these women were taught rituals and incantations and ways to move energy, like Kundalini kind of, through their bodies so that men would enter them and would receive the energetic power of these women. They were like upgrades. It was like getting like, better wheels on your car, or, tinted windows. It was like upgrading their energy. And these men would become these colossal, brilliant energies that had this transmutative energy coming from the feminine. And the church didn't like that. So they took that whole process and turned it into something called brothels. And this idea that men just went there to get their rocks off, and it didn't really have to do with anything. And you should only ever spill your seed in order to procreate. And it literally removed this ability to be upgraded energetically by these priestesses. And I didn't even realize that until recently. When we talk about Mary Magdalene, right? Jesus's wife, sorry, but she was taught how to create this energy in her body so that when her husband, Jesus, would enter her, he would be upgraded energetically, and all these incredible magical powers would be downloaded into him. That is what those temples and those women were for. It wasn't just about sex. So now bring this back to this frame in the Middle Ages and all these other things. And you've got these women who are having visions and having awarenesses. What do we do with them? We kill them at Gallows Hill in Salem because they're witches. And what does that precedent set? That women shouldn't open their mouths about what they feel or what they think. And where did that come from? Did it come from the men? It came from the church.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that's happened and such an unfortunate thing, and how modern society has been simultaneously hypersexualized while forever disconnected from the actual magic, if you will, of sex and
Yeah.
beautiful divine sexual relations between a loving man and a loving woman, and conscious connections made. And that attack is so deep and it's so purposeful and it's so purported at many different fronts because they know how powerful it is. And so they do attack specifically the sexual energy and sexual nature of both men and women in so many different ways through, mutilating genitals, through porn, through perversion, and the proportion of all this degenerate sexuality. They kind of create a false duality in that, hey, you could either be prude or you are some deviant fucking maniac.
Right.
And they've kind of conflated the exploration of sex and kind of studying sex's significance with the deviant garbage and bullshit in the public's mind. And then there's always obviously a lot of gray area messiness to it. There's some that claim to be doing one and are actually just the other, and all this stuff. But we are sexual beings. Sexual energy is powerful. There's no denying that. I don't care how, anti-spirituality you are. If you are a living, breathing mammal that has any sort of proper hormones to you, think of yourself and how you feel when you feel sexually charged, whether you're just turned on or attracted or in the moment with someone. That's energy. That is real. That is powerful. Men will move mountains in the world to get and impress women.
Yeah, like
Women
in Helen of
will,
Troy, right?
yeah, exactly. Women,
Base that launched 1,000 ships.
exactly. Women will do lots of things and improve themselves and be themselves in their highest regard out of sexual energy to exist healthily within themselves, but then also to get the mate that they want or deserve, whatever. And only through recognizing the importance of this vital energy within us can we pay mind to maintaining its health. And only through maintaining that energy's health within ourselves can we be holistically healthy.
Right.
Because if your genital region and the energetic center there is off, that creates a cascade of problems, not just physically, but emotionally.
Mhm.
And
And
so,
that's why we see so many people being born, through, I believe it's injury, but whatever, having autism. I mean, we used to have 1 in 55 children had autism. Now it's 1 in 12. And now they're saying it's going to be 1 in 6 soon. And by 2030, they're saying 1 in 3. And those children are coming in and they're completely asexual. Many of them do not have a desire to have any procreative anything. And so they're going to weed themselves out, thereby, completely stopping that bloodline, but also being members of society that are being basically, automatons that can pay bills and don't necessarily have the ability and, the ability to contribute the way that maybe they would have had they not had these injuries.
yeah, they're just useless members of society, to put it aggressively. But that's the way that the certain entities see these
Right.
people.
That's not how we see them. Yeah.
Correct. And it's the same people saying that the world is overcrowded and that people should, not have children, and that, oh, there's climate change, global warming, global cooling, they can't make up their damn minds. Same people saying, there should be less people and that think that general society are cattle and not actual worthy humans.
Right.
It's the same people pushing vaccines. It's the same people pushing homosexuality. It's the same people pushing transgenderism. It's the same people, guys. It's the same people.
Well,
It's
I
the
do
same.
think I will say I do put a sticky note here on homosexuality, because I think homosexuality is actually represented accordingly. I think there are even more homosexual people that don't feel comfortable being who they are. And I will argue that in homosexual couples, especially the ones that I've coached with, there is a masculine feminine polarity in the relationship. So even though they may be attracted to the opposite, or sorry, to the same sex, many, many times, if you look at the energy that's outward for that person, it is dualistic. Even though they're attracted to the same outside, they tend to operate in opposite roles. So I will say that when it comes to that, that is something that for whatever reason, I believe is very prevalent in society. I do think that it is incentivized 100%. I think that, that it's encouraged, and maybe more so than it actually occurs. But I do think that there are quite a lot of people, especially, really brilliant, really contributing members of society who are also homosexuals, who were not necessarily indoctrinated by society. I do think that that does occur naturally.
I will always caveat the conversation with there is a difference between the people and the agenda of
Yes,
something.
100%.
There's a difference
100%.
between the end people, the end populace of something, anything, any group, and the
Right.
social engineering forces that
100%.
perpetuate something and then are using even perhaps that group for
Yes.
their promotion of other things and taking their baby steps towards.
And that's another example of a group that knows that now. I mean, they're on to that.
Yes,
because
gays
now
against
that the
groomers
new
and all the good stuff.
Yeah, because now that, this whole new pedophile movement, or what is it called? Young person attracted something.
Minor attracted persons.
Right. Now that minor attracted persons have shown up, many people in the gay community are like, hold on a second. This is not the same. You don't go on our flag. Like, they're like,
Those that know the way the world works know that it was always going this direction.
right.
The social engineering homosexual movement was always to get towards pedophilia and transgenderism. That doesn't mean
which started with the church. Look at that, full circle.
Yeah, and it's you mentioned whether homosexuality is natural or not. We don't have to argue about that. I just think it's an interesting conversation as well, in that what is natural, and does anyone exist in their natural state anymore when we have an ever increasing amount of chemicals in our newborns' bodies, whether it's microplastics or this, that, the other, all these endocrine disrupting things that are entering a baby's body in utero or is already in their DNA. And
my husband was just looking up methylation yesterday, and about folic acid being added to things, and folate, and how many of us can't methylate folate. Yeah.
There's so many things, and a mother and a father's DNA could already be damaged in all these different ways. Then they make a child, and that child is starting with damaged DNA plus the physical toxins.
Right.
Are they even born with the hormonal balance or inner whatever that they were supposed to have? Even though someone is born a way, I will argue, does that mean it's natural? Perhaps not. Also, there is, of course, the social engineering that is undeniable. Like you said, the incentivizing, it's an agenda push. It absolutely is. That is,
but all of this stems from trying to disconnect the masculine and the feminine.
Yes.
If we can gang up all the masculine against the feminine together, if we can gang up all the feminine and against the masculine together, if we can create homogenous groups where they can't connect, I mean, absolutely 100%. But many of us in this generation we are having those visions again. We are becoming aware. Our husbands are not telling us to shut up. We're no longer being subjugated by the church in the same way. And so you're seeing things like what's happening to me, where I'm having these downloads, and they are downloads. They're knowings that come into my head that I then go research and, oh, look, that's actually a thing, the intuition, right? And this is something that, women are meant to have. I mean, we're supposed to be, like you said, the spiritual advisors in this case, when we're not shut down by, powers that want to subjugate us all.
It's interesting because it's interesting how many different people have different experiences and how many things can be going on simultaneously at a societal level. Because you just said, we're not having our men telling us to shut up anymore. That sounds great. But I think at the same time, right now, men are telling women to shut up a bit more, and that's also needed and necessary. And some women are also enjoying that more because their men are actually having a fucking backbone rather than allowing themselves to be walked all over by women, which has been the perpetuated kind of relationship dynamic.
Well, I mean, men aren't shutting down women's intuition like they did before. Like, don't talk about that. Nobody needs to hear about your visions. The church is going to kill us. Like, that's what I mean. I mean, yeah, men absolutely are sticking up for themselves more, but I also think a lot more women are sticking up for men too.
Yeah. There's a lot of beautiful things happening in everyone and not everyone, but a lot of people comprehending we are in this together. Let's figure this out. What has happened to the both of us as a unit and as a society, and let's work to mend that. But yeah, and basically what I was touching upon just there is that the average relationship now, and I would say most of society, has been, while this whole word of patriarchy has been thrown around and it's everyone's favorite word and nobody knows, whatever, all this nonsense.
I hate that word.
Most of society in the Western world is actually matriarchal. I think at all levels. In the household, most women are the decision makers. Most men have been led to go soft entirely in many different ways. And I think most women are the backbone of most households because most men are just pathetic. And most women then, in their natural sense, have to compensate and they masculinize and they're running the household. And it's been its own social engineering movement. And look at all the media, all the TV shows, all the movies. It's always some dumb moron husband and the intelligent smarty pants wife and this, that, the other. The men are always the dumb butt of the jokes, and also the women is the competent one, and that's reflective of how people have been led themselves to exist. And I see it all around me, and honestly, it disgusts me. But it also saddens me because neither of those parties are actually fulfilled and happy. There is no way to be in those kind of matriarchal scenarios because it's just not natural. While everyone's running and screaming patriarchy, society and the households are mostly matriarchal, I would say. But it's interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And it's such a, it's a misdirection. It's, oh, don't look over here, what's happening. No, it's actually this. And it's a complete inversion of reality, such is the way of the world in today's times. But there's no way for anyone to be happy like that. And so it saddens me because men have been led to believe, let your woman do whatever you want, happy wife, happy life, it's all about her. If she wants you home by 7, you got to be home by 7. Otherwise, this is bad, blah, 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 all this stupid shit. And it's lies. Not only is it lies, and not only is it bad for a man's health, but it's actually not going to make the woman happy.
No, not at
That's the worst part of it. That's the worst part. It's not even effective at the cost of self-degradation. You are actually going to just get the opposite effect. And
right. And that's a good point because women are seeking the perfect partner. But if you ask a woman who's the perfect partner, he picks up after himself. He checks in on me when, I have a question, or he's very emotionally available.
Yeah.
So basically you want a woman. Like you want your husband to be a woman. Well, no, I don't. I want him to be strong and I want him to be fortified and I want him to focus on what matters, not like the sock that he walked over because he's a big picture guy and he didn't see the sock on the floor. right? Like you can't have it both ways. You can't expect men to behave in ways that are not conducive to their natural way, right? Men are big picture. Men are like, okay, how do I fix this thing? Men are like, let me solve your problem, not let me listen to you vent about it. That's where you go to your girlfriends. That doesn't mean that he doesn't care. It just means that he's literally like, okay, how do I fix this? Like, I get it. It's a problem. Let's fix it. That's the way that a man is. You want a woman to do that, then it's going to be, oh my gosh, that must be so hard. You poor thing. Let's go drink some wine and watch TV. Neither one is right or wrong. They're just different. But when you expect what you would do out of your partner, well, now you're going to start creating that, you're going to remove that duality. You're going to remove that mystery. And you think it's going to create more intimacy, but it really doesn't. Like, it's like, oh, the first time I was ever in the bathroom when he went to the bathroom. I'm telling you, ladies, like, if that's what you're looking forward to, there's nothing hot about watching your man take a dump. Like nothing. Like there's no reason. There's no reason to suddenly breach that. Oh, we're married now. Oh, well. So now you want to smell shit? Like, walk me through this. Like what changed, right? Like, it's like, you're dating and he lives with 4 other guys and their house is disgusting and they live in a bachelor pad, but you put on this cute little apron and you're like, I'm going to clean for you guys. Like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And you go in there and you do it. And he's like, thanks, babe. That was amazing. The house looks spotless. Fast forward 10 years and it's like, get your shit off the ground. I am not your maid. I am not putting my stuff on. Like, blah, 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 blah. Like you keep the house like trash. Well, what changed? Nothing changed. You expected a different energy from a man, period. End of story. Does that mean that a man can't clean up after himself? No, I mean, it doesn't. But in the greater scheme of things, if he's out chopping wood, if he's out making money, if he's out fighting with the landlord because of something stupid you did, or he's downtown fixing something for you, does he also need to clean up after himself? Or if you're there and you're next to the mess, could you clean it up? And this comes right out of Byron Katie, who's very much a feminist, talks about the work. And she tells this story on Marie Forleo's podcast about a woman who's mad that a man keeps leaving the toilet seat up. Does the man care if the toilet seat's up? No, he doesn't. It makes it easier for him to pee when the toilet seat's up, right? Can you put the toilet seat down without even having to talk to him? Is it really going to cause you that much anger? Or could you just put it down? Right? You're the one who actually wants it down. He doesn't give a shit. So who should put the toilet seat down? The person who wants it down or the person who feels like it's their responsibility because they put it up? Now, in my argument, I think that you should put it down. You're the one who cares about it. But if you want to, and it's up to you, you could go and find him or call him at work or get mad and say, hey, you didn't put the toilet seat down, and have all that animosity. Or you could cut all of that off and just put the goddamn toilet seat down.
So you have just accepted responsibility for women in the role that they play in changing their expectations of their partner over time. And that's wonderful. So thank you for accepting that responsibility on behalf of women in that way. I will come back and maybe snag back some of that responsibility for men, in that what has happened to that woman in that time frame that has created this change. Perhaps at the beginning, she showed up at least presenting or acting or trying to be in her feminine frame. And so accepting her male counterpart, her boyfriend, man she wants to court or husband, whatever, expecting him to be masculine, and that's fine, and loving him for it. But I think a lot of the times the man now they're in a relationship, the man fails that woman over a long enough time frame. That woman learns, I am actually not safe. I am not protected. I am not provided for. The masculine energy is not there for her where it needs to be from her partner. So that woman masculinizes.
Right. And it's a form of parenting because
that too. That's a whole other thing.
mothering is masculine. It's the energy of leadership. So motherhood is a masculine quality, believe it or not. Did you get this done? Did you do your homework? Did you do this? Did you do that? It's very much a masculine energy.
Well, that's
mother.
modern mothering. That's modern
Right.
mothering. Let's
Right.
make the specificity there. That's the modern iteration of motherhood. That's not necessarily mothering at its natural state, right?
Right. But
Yeah.
I mean mothering in terms of like what women then transfer onto their husbands. So it's like, how come you didn't do this? How come you didn't do it? How come the trash didn't go out? How come this? And it's because now I'm watching you, like you just said, like you're like, okay, she doesn't trust him. She doesn't feel supported. Now I'm having to prompt him and be like,
Yep.
did you do this? Did you do that? Because now I don't trust you to protect my back.
Yep.
I've got to protect my back. And now I've got to train you to protect my back because I want to stay with you and I don't want to do this indefinitely. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to consistently prompt you to try to get you back on track so that you will start to fulfill the role so I can lean back. So you're right. It is both parties.
Yes, absolutely. And it's both parties' fault for picking the wrong person or a person that's not in a healthy position. You know, that I always accept responsibility as a man. So I think a healthy woman will respond to what the man does. And so most men out there are overgrown boys. They aren't actually men. They are overgrown little boys who never matured or even, got to experience a healthy male childhood in whatever regard and are stuck there and don't actually grow up, which then warrants the mothering behavior from these women. It's cute at first, a lot of the times. And, that's why a woman, especially those that don't know better, those that watch these dumb movies, those that see their parents having an unhealthy experience in relationship dynamics, they think that is femininity in its good form. Ah, yes, I'm caretaking him, blah, blah, blah. There's a difference between caring for him and like you said, that mothering dynamic that occurs of like, hey, did you do that? Did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. But so many men out there need that because they are just little boys. It's a lot going on here. And really the only solution is for everyone to step up and be better. But because if a woman started doing that behavior and a man was in his proper form, he would correct that shit real quick. He would.
She wouldn't need to do it though.
Exactly. So yeah, it wouldn't have to happen in the first place if she came in and tried even for some reason. Then it wouldn't go on. But again, like you said, she wouldn't be inspired to do it. And then if she were someone that was so traumatized that that's her default, he probably wouldn't choose her in the first place. That's a whole thing.
Right.
But it stops when the man stops it. And that's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen in relationship dynamics. Both parties need to be working on getting healthy. But if one or the other is not, it's just all down the drain. And especially when that person is the man. The man is the leader of a relationship in its most natural form of relationships. I think that is the ultimate way for happiness overall. I'm not telling anyone what to do. I just think that's the greatest chance of happiness. And you mentioned yourself something very interesting. It's an interesting circumstance that you find yourself in that you said you are the kind of the money maker of your household, but you respect your husband in the sense that he is the leader. And he, I'm sure, respects your wisdom, your guidance, your thoughts. So he hears you. He creates the environment. He creates the space for you to flourish and be seen and be heard. Yet you respect that he is in the driver's seat. That's wonderful. That sounds like a recipe for absolute success and happiness. It doesn't necessarily matter who's making the money. And that's where everyone gets caught up. So many people.
And we did for a long time, too. We did. My husband was very much emasculated at the beginning by how much money I was making. It was really hard for him. And it wasn't until he realized, and I had said it all along, but he had to figure it out for himself, that it was because of everything else that he did that left me feeling safe enough to manifest the money that I needed to make in order to take care of our family. It was because he was covering down on those other things. It was because he had my back. Had he not had my back, I never would. I mean, if something happened to him, God forbid, I wouldn't be able to perform at the level that I am. And he finally figured that out, that he's the person when I have a question or I'm like, I don't understand why this happened in my business. Can you help me make sense of this? He has the answers. He is my confidant. He's the person that I go to and I say, hey, I don't know how to do this, or I'm struggling with this. And he'll be like, okay, let me think about it. And he guides me and he coaches me and he supports me and he fortifies what I do. And if he wasn't doing that, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And I'm very, very forthcoming about that with my clients. They're like, how do you do it all? I don't do it all. I do not do it all.
Who makes the financial decisions in your household?
My husband makes the financial decisions. I keep track of the finances and then I present them to him and I say, hey, here's the picture. What are we doing?
You are such an exception to the way things are generally done in the sense that most relationships where the script is flipped or not even flipped in this modern world, just where most situations where the woman is making even more money than the man, even if they're, or even a same amount or a comparable amount, because money is such an important thing in today's world to exist and navigate society, it's equated with power. Money is stored power in the form of a number or, piece of paper. But because it's a lot of people's focus and the only thing that they think about when there is that scenario where the woman's earning as much or more, it itself is something that can be hard to digest as a man. But also the problem is the attributes that normally come in both sides of that circumstance. Normally in that circumstance, it might be occurring because that woman is a masculinized businesswoman or an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, that might be a corporate lady boss, whatever. And all the attributes that come with it are masculine a lot of the times. And that's a masculinized woman, while simultaneously perhaps that man's not doing so hot because XYZ reason, he's not in his masculine frame, conquering the world, doing well.
But if you look at that though, okay, like in the business boss babe world, I finally out-earned my husband. Think about a world that incentivizes a woman to literally be competing with her own household. It's like, girl, you're on the same team. So what if you out-earned him? You didn't out-earn shit. Together, you made this much money is how you should be looking at it, because you're one team. But the way that we have this infighting and then it's celebrated. You go, girl. Oh my God, that's so amazing. Look at you. And it's like, you're literally like drawing attention to creating space between you and your human counterpart. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
I've never been that way.
Yeah, that woman is unfortunately very misled, a moron, and her husband or wife or boyfriend or whatever is a punk. Because if he wasn't, she wouldn't be behaving like that. And she,
I don't think he has any idea. But I mean, there was a point where I was making $100,000 a month and my husband wasn't making anything. So what? My husband was making $100,000 a month. My husband had better clothes than everybody. He had a brand new car that was paid for in cash. My husband had a brand new house. That wasn't mine. That was his. That was ours. There was never a moment where I was like, well, this is my money, except for when it came to paying his ex-wife. Maybe I got a little of this is my money. But other than that, it's ours. Like, you want this? Go get it. You want this thing? Go get, like, I don't understand. But if you look at it and the fact that someone would post that on social and think that would be lauded just goes to show you the way that society, like you said, the way that society functions. Good girl, you show your husband. Like, isn't this your best friend? Isn't this your till death do us part? Isn't this the father of your children? And here you are publicly stating that you have out-earned him. Good for you. Congratulations. I mean, Isn't that like some Benedict Arnold shit, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think every other like week there's some stupid fucking trend going around where some girls are doing some stupid shit to humiliate their husband or make fun of them or point out their flaws or like say how disgusting they are. It's
I
it's
have no respect for people like that. I saw a t-shirt or sweatshirt the other day, like something about telling a man to shut the fuck up or something. And I'm like, who are you? Like, in what world do you think that you are somehow superior to men? Like, it just, I don't know. But the good news is I have 3 sons that I'm raising. And let me tell you, they will not ever be treated like that. Like,
oh
the
yeah, because
what
I
was
mean a woman could be like that all she wants. If men actually stood up for themselves and had any sort of semblance of self-respect, they would
it?
not then be with that woman in any regard. Well, that woman doesn't procreate, and neither do her ideas, hopefully. So,
Right.
like all of it ends when either side gets themselves together, because then the other side could not get away with the bullshit. The problem is there's patheticness on both sides of things. And so again, all sides tolerate
And
all.
there's also tolerance too. There's tolerance of the two sides of the behavior, right? So, like, so many people stop doing weed because their business is going to drug test them randomly and they don't want to lose their job. So they stop doing something they absolutely love because they care more about their job and their livelihood. And that's why they do drug tests, is to keep people from doing these things, right? Because they're afraid. We don't have that in relationships. There's no, if I act like an asshole, I'm not going to be able to find a partner. They know there's always going to be someone that's going to put up with this. I'm going to be able to find some simpy husband who's secretly a homosexual that just doesn't, want anyone to know and is going to wait on me hand and foot and let me walk all over him. I know I can do that
I'll say
because there
women.
aren't those.
I'll say women get that. I don't think men get that benefit.
What do you mean?
I think the lowest of the barrel, bottom of the barrel in social desirability women can still always find a man, whereas the lowest bottom of the barrel men will suffer eternally without a woman.
I don't know, because I think there are some narcissist men out there, and I'm speaking actual narcissism here. I think there are some men out there that treat women like absolute garbage, but they look really good and they're good in bed, and so they will consistently be able to attract feminine partners that will consistently buy their bullshit. So I think it goes both ways.
Well, that man still has positive qualities. I'm not saying they're a good person. I'm saying they still have positive qualities.
Well, but the
That
female would still have positive qualities. Maybe she makes really good pot holders or something. I don't know. There's redeeming qualities to everyone. Everyone is both good and evil. Everyone is up and down. Everyone is here and there. Everyone is everything. So I see what you're saying, but I would argue that both sexes can find someone in that will tolerate their crap for the sake of something else that they get as a payoff.
I'd still push back and think that there's a lot of cases of lonely men out there that have zero chance with anyone at all. And perhaps they don't deserve a chance, but yeah, that it's
Like, I was talking to a client yesterday who has a husband who was in jail for 14 years, who literally cheats on her every single night, literally every single night. Like, she's telling me stories about all the times that he cheated on her.
he's in
And
jail.
I'm like, well, he isn't anymore. He was. And she's just like, but when he's good, he's so good.
What do you think is the role of cheating in a relationship in regards to men versus women doing that? Is
That's a
it
great question. Yeah.
different?
So for women, I think that it's about not getting their needs met. It's about not having someone that they feel that they feel safe with, that they feel supported by, that they feel like they can be in their feminine with. They have to, like, they start to feel like I never feel like I'm enough. With men, it's that they don't feel like their partner is able to receive anymore. So one time I was on a plane and I was sitting next to this big burly Italian guy with like rings on every finger, and he's showing me pictures of his girlfriend, and I was like, oh, you have a girlfriend? And he's like, well, I'm actually married. I'm going to visit my girlfriend in Miami or whatever we were going. And I'm like, oh, can I ask why you have a girlfriend if you're married? And he said, you know what? Let me tell you a story. My wife, she has everything she could ever want. We have the car, we have the house, we have this. But after a while, she stopped receiving. I'd bring her flowers and she'd tell me, oh, why did you spend money on flowers? You could have spent it on this. Da, 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 da. The kids need this. I'd buy her a diamond bracelet. She'd be like, why? What made you go spend money on that? You mashugana or whatever she said, in Italian, that's the Yiddish word. But, why would you do this stupid thing? And after a while, he said it stopped being fun to take care of her. She didn't receive anymore. My girlfriend, I buy her a Louis Vuitton and it's like I hung the moon. She thinks it's the most incredible thing ever. When I take her to dinner, she's so appreciative. She tells me that she loves me. She tells me that she's grateful for me. That's what I want. And in that moment, as much as I thought this guy was like, wow, I understood. I understood that this man was just desperately desiring somewhere to give that he would feel that receiving. So I think it's different for men and women when they stray. Women are like, I need someone who's going to let me finally relax into my femininity. And for men, it's like, I need someone who makes me feel like the hero, like the fortifier, like the bringer.
Would you say it's more or less or the same amount of acceptable or healthy behavior in one regard or the other?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Like, is it as bad if a man cheats as if a woman cheats?
So the word bad is so relative, right?
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, are there children involved? Like, was it his sister? Was it her brother, her stepdad? Like, I mean, there's so many different outliers to say, like, how bad was it? I think that anytime a relationship dissolves under infidelity or mistrust, it's probably a bad thing. Am I going to lie to you and sit here and say that I've never cheated? No, I'm not. As a matter of fact, and this is part of my true transparency, I cheated on my first husband. I absolutely did. I cheated on my first husband because my needs were not being met. Now, I'm not saying I was right in doing that, but I'm telling you why I did it. He didn't have time for me. He didn't want to be with me. Every night I would go to bed by myself. I obviously learned the error of my ways. I've never cheated on my second husband. That we've been together for 12 years. I've never even looked at another man, but I absolutely cheated. And it was because I was not getting my needs met. Now, I could have stayed in that loveless marriage and continued to not get my needs met because death do us part. And I probably would have stopped on a train track about 10 years ago, and just waited for the train to come, because that was the level of fulfillment that I was getting from that marriage. So do I think what I did was bad? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Would I go back in time? I mean, I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have the life that I have now if I didn't. That was my get out of, my soul was screaming. So do I look at myself and think I'm a piece of shit? No, I don't, because I don't feel like he was holding up his side of the bargain. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think cheating sucks, but I think it happens when needs are not being met by either party. And I don't think one or the other is worse. I just think that it's unfortunate. Fair and enough. I think I do wish I had told my husband before I cheated on him, but I don't regret that I left him.
Fair enough. What do you think is the role of the institution of marriage in the form of government contracts, or the role of it in healthy relationships? Has it been a healthy thing for most relationships, you think, or does it allow for unhealthy behavior? What's your take there?
Well, I don't think anything should be government sanctioned. If I had my way, I would get rid of every citizenship and everything else. But unfortunately, I have children, and I mean, and we've got iPhones and everything else at this point. I mean, we might as well have chips. Let's be real. Like, we know they know everything about us. So it's kind of a moot point. If it was 50 years ago, I probably would renounce all the things and, the licenses. Like, I get a right to fish. Screw you. I'm a human on the planet. There's a fish. I've got a hook. I'm gonna fish. Like that whole thing. That's a whole nother conversation to be had. But in terms of the institution of marriage, I think that was something that was created by the church. You had to have certain qualities in order to marry this person, and you had to have witnesses and all these other things. I don't necessarily think that monogamy should be institutionalized. I think that it needs to be an understanding between two people. I do think that two people could absolutely say, hey, you and me, we're together, but we want to go do whatever with other people. As long as both people are okay with that and their children aren't part of it and they're doing it discreetly. I mean, people that go to, dungeons and all that, like, more power to you. I think anytime we're talking about being dishonest with another person, that's a problem. But if things are happening and everyone's aware of what's going on, do I think there needs to be an institution? Probably not. That said, when it came to my husband, I mean, I wanted to be tied to him, connected to him, united with him in all the ways. I mean, if I could, I would, we'd be like Siamese twins. I mean, I adore him to the moon and back. So I wanted that, that ritual. And I would argue that when you do connect to that inner energy, you will want a ritual for that too. There's an integration that happens that you want to acknowledge that in your case, that you're going to protect that energy. In my case, that I surrendered to it. So yeah, I think that marriage is a beautiful thing for those who prescribe to it. And I don't think it's necessary if people don't prescribe to it. And I do think that it has a very singular definition between a man and a woman. And I don't think there's anything wrong with creating a word that means that between a man and a man or a woman and a woman. But I don't think that the word marriage explains what that is.
Yeah, well put, well put. And yeah, I'm sure we're certainly in agreement in our ideas of how much the government should be involved in a person's everyday life. But
Anything.
the reason I ask is because we were talking earlier about how kind of people become complacent or people kind of stop trying or this and that. And I think it's a very common thing that a marriage certificate allows either party to slack off in showing up in their proper capacity. And then that other person's not going to leave them because now there's this big horde of paperwork and inconvenience and this and that and the other and all this garbage that's state enforced. And so I think it's been so corrupted from what we could, is arguably a positive kind of sphere to begin with. It's been corrupted and allowed to allowed a lot of unhealthy behaviors. Whereas if you don't have a government contract with the man you're with or the woman you're with, the understanding can be, hey, I love you. You love me. I show up for you this way. You show up for me that way. In this current capacity, we love each other, and this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Mm-hmm. If you stop, I will be hurt. Perhaps I'll always love you, but I am not going to subject myself to damaging behavior or to, being failed in so and so way. And not in a threatening way. But to me, it's a mutually beautiful thing in that, hey, we are with each other for all of these years out of mutual desire to be with each other and mutual benefit. I think that is far more beautiful than, we got a marriage certificate, so we got to stick it out, blah, blah, blah. And that's what happens so often.
Yeah, I definitely think that it is a responsibility, and having that relationship that says that in a way it's a social contract, right? It's like if you think about like the social contract, like you own a business and I own a business. I promise not to rob your business. Ergo, you're promising not to rob my business, right? So marriage is a social contract. It's like, I'm going to be true to you. You're going to be true to me. You're going to hold my heart. I'm going to hold your heart. So that's really where it comes from. It's like we're acknowledging that together we are going to have each other's backs. And we're going to prioritize having each other's backs over having anybody else's back. And so that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, and that's really what it should be. The problem is when people start acting like a bunch of animals and don't kind of keep up the social contracts themselves, that leaves the void for the state to kind of come in and pitch this alleged fantastic idea of, oh, well, you dummies over there can't handle business amongst yourselves, so allow us, loving government, to step in as a third party and enforce upon everybody. Right. But if everyone had their shit together,
make some money off of it, yeah, absolutely, and give you tax incentives for doing it.
Yeah, if everyone had their shit together, they wouldn't need that intervention, and so that's where the place kind of comes from, and it's been created out of the void. And so, in our closing here, I'd love to know how someone that loves what you say, loves what you talk about, loves the work that you do, and wants to work with you or wants to check out your content, where can they go? How can they contact you to do so?
Oh, thanks for that. So they can go to AmyLeeWestervelt.com, or they can find me on Instagram on the AmyLee Westervelt.
Awesome. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And there's so many interesting questions I'd love to ask you, but for the sake of time,
we'll have to do a part 2 or something.
Yeah. I'll close off with asking you, is there any particular message or takeaway that either we covered or that we didn't even cover that you would just really like our listeners and viewers to be left off with?
Yeah, I think look for the connection first. You know, so much of society is trying to tell you how all of the people are against you, or the people that are, you know, they don't believe what you believe, or, you know, these people are out to get you. Whenever somebody tells you that somebody's out to get you, chances are that person or that energy is trying to usurp your power. So notice that, like when someone says, oh, the women are trying to do this, or the men are trying to do this, who is it that's saying that? And what did they benefit from by pitting you against this other party? So my advice would be seek first to understand, why is this person behaving in this way? Why is this group behaving in this way? Most of the time you can find that it's fueled by anger. And usually that anger is something that either doesn't really even pertain to them, or something that happened years before they were even born. And so when you can really tap in and go, okay, at the end of the day, if this person and I were stuck on an island and all we strip away our identities and all we had was conversation, what commonality can I find? And when you do this, and you do this consistently, you will find that the conflict in your life, the anger, the animosity, the feeling that you've got to go out there and fight, you know, the man, will start to dissolve, and you'll find so many more aligned people, experiences, and things that come your way because you're looking for that in the environment. You're looking for the good. You're looking for the connection. You're looking for that unity, like that divine union. And the more that you connect to that, the more you're going to see that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic closing message. The more you connect with yourself, the more you can more clearly see what's going on in the world around you. When you are analyzing a message and what to do with a message that you receive in any form, consider not just the message, but also the messenger, and also who sent the messenger. And only through analyzing all of these three components can you comprehend how to act accordingly. AmyLee, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Male-female dynamics are a very hot topic right now, and honestly they probably always have been and probably always will be. But especially today, as we've seen the absolute inversion of masculinity and femininity and the demonization of both of those in their purest form, I think it's very essential to have conversations like these and come to comprehend and appreciate the beauty that is when men act like men and women act like women. if you don't have a fundamental framework that's healthy regarding masculinity and femininity and what it means to be in a relationship between the two, I don't think there's quite a way to be healthy. And if you find a way to be fulfilled with a completely unhealthy thought behind masculinity and femininity, and you never quite get a good relationship going, well, then your thoughts die anyway, because then you'll never go on to have a relationship and have offspring. So, it's really no way around it. We have to come to comprehend our counterparts, and we have to come to comprehend ourselves and what our roles are and what our jobs are and how we can coexist and be fruitful and multiply. So, hopefully this conversation helped. Stay tuned, plenty more episodes coming. You're listening to the Health King's Court. Ancient wisdom, modern health.